Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we discuss lost or forgotten horror gems. I'm your host, Justin Steele. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the 1984 thriller Scream for Help, directed by Michael Winner and written by Tom Holland. Starring Rachael Kelly as Christy, a girl who has cried wolf too many times, and now friends and family do not believe her when she says her stepfather is having an affair and is trying to kill her mother. The stakes are raised as the truth comes out, and it becomes up to Christy to save herself and her mother before it's too late. Despite the thrilling action flicks that Winner is known for and the revered horror pictures created by Tom Holland, Scream for Help can be categorized as an over-the-top thriller that is so bad it's actually good, really good, and really bad. Also starring Marie Masters, David Allen Brooks, and Rocco Sisto. Also joining me in the house tonight is my very special guest, Zena Dixon. And thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. And thank you, Zena Dixon, for joining us again. I'm so excited to have you and talk about Scream for Help.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on. I love having our movie chats.
Absolutely. Well, we ended the last chat talking about Scream for Help, and we were cracking up laughing, so there was no doubt that we had to do this episode this week, which I think is a good, it's a very standard 80s horror movie. It has this sort of autumn look to it. So I think for the October episode, it is the one of the best episodes we can do. But this movie, I tell you, it's what most people, I think of, horror fans or not, that think of 80s horror in terms of we have some great, amazing movies. We have some ridiculous movies, and Scream for Help really encapsulates this. It goes from being a horror movie to a comedy to an after-school special. Before you know it, the acting is over the top. But like most movies, I feel like that are so bad that they're good, and I think this fits in that category. But like most of those movies, they're sincere. The acting in this movie, they're not trying to make a bad movie. They're not trying to be ridiculous, which makes it even more ridiculous and over the top. And the acting in it, it's sincere. And what's also crazy about it, and we'll talk about this later, but what's crazy about it is I think everything in it works. Like the ultimate plan at the end of the second half of the movie, the way it's set up, it's terrible, but yet everything works. And in a way that I think that's part of the problem, because the writing or the dialogue, everything in it is like the dialogue is basically justifying everything they're about to do. Like where they're just vague example, they'll be like, oh, we have to keep this door closed because if we don't keep it closed at 2 a.m., then blah, 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 setting up. It's constantly setting itself up. So you definitely aren't going to go away being like, oh, there's holes in that because it works. But it's so ridiculous because of that. But Zena, how did you come to Scream for Help? When was the first time you think you saw it?
I was probably honestly I was late to the game when it comes to this movie, so I probably watched it maybe a couple of years ago, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and
Gotcha.
I thought it was just a great movie. Like I know that it's ridiculous and I know that it's over the top, but there's just something about it that's just like kind of like what you said. It has like a sincere kind of thing about it, where it's just like, oh, I see what they're trying to do here. Even when they try to have the messages, like little messages in there, so that's cool. And then kind of like what you said again, not that I'm trying to mimic everything you're saying, but I feel like you hit it spot on. It's like I feel like this is an 80s movie
Yes.
through and through when it comes to the characters, when it comes to the ridiculous like close-ups, and even when it comes to the ridiculous music, like the music is just outrageous.
Melodramatic. It is over the top, which is crazy because I can't think of the guy's name, but the bassist from Led Zeppelin wrote this Lifetime music that we hear. I mean, it's over the top melodrama. Oh, it's craziness. And
And
you got to look at the behind the scenes people of this. You've got Michael Winner, who did like the Death Wish movies, big action movies, which definitely have horrific elements. You have Tom Holland, the revered Tom Holland, who writer of Psycho 2, director of Fright Night, Child's Play, and I was watching the Blu-ray interview, and the Blu-ray looks great, but the interview and Tom Holland says that he probably, if we didn't have Scream for Help and his frustrations with the direction on that, he probably wouldn't have gone on to direct Fright Night, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, definitely 80s horror, but just an all-time. And I'm glad then, in a way, that Scream for Help was made because he was so like, wait, this can't happen again. I got to direct it. And we have one of the best 80s movies, in my opinion, Fright Night. But just, yeah, what do you think though in terms of overall? Like when you watch this movie, because I think like the plan, like I said, the plan in it's really good, but it's so ridiculous at the same time. Like, just what are your overall thoughts of this crazy movie?
Well, it is kind of like what you said. When you look back on it, it's like, okay, you have like Michael Winner, who is a great director because he did all the action movies, and he also did the movie from the 70s, The Sentinel, which is
Oh,
that is just like one of my favorites,
oh,
right?
I didn't,
So
I didn't know that he did that one. I missed that.
yes, so it's like, okay, great. But then you also have Tom Holland, like you said, Fright Night, Child's Play, Thinner, The Initiation of Sarah.
Yeah,
So it's like, okay, we have all these great formulas. So maybe it was just kind of like they just didn't mesh well together. That's just pretty
yeah,
much what I feel like it is. And I wouldn't recommend this movie to someone, honestly, who's who's really into like hardcore horror, as an example. Like, say if they're expecting a whole bunch of gore, you're not even going to get that until like the end. But even with that, that's not a whole lot.
yeah.
So I don't know. Kind of even going back to, I probably didn't even answer your question as of yet, but just going back to like with the first one, I remember I randomly just selected this movie because I kind of like the poster. You know,
Yeah,
I
it's a good poster.
it's I love the poster so much.
Yeah,
I think that's probably one of the reasons why I just adore the movie. So I remember watching the movie, and this is when I was just watching any and everything, anything I can get my hands on, like that I thought was like horror related, or because this one I don't really consider it too much, honestly, a horror. I think that it's more of a thriller
sure.
suspense, little mystery. But I like the fact that with this movie, that with Christy and Paul, that they're kind of playing this game and it's going back and forth. And then even how the movie is being set up, you think that, okay, there must be something wrong with Christy. That's what at first, as the viewer, you're thinking. There's no way. And, because something I think about is, even though this is like way after the movie The Stepfather,
Yes. Oh, yes.
that's something that came to mind. So I actually saw The Stepfather first before I saw this movie. So it's just kind of it turned in a direction that honestly I didn't expect. Not because it was shocking, but just because, okay, I just was honestly expecting like a generic type of formula. I feel like it's predictable, but it's not the predictable that I thought it was going to be. Because how they're setting it up, like you said, it's kind of like you have this girl, this young teenage girl. She's annoying. Like, that's just the bottom line. She's annoying.
Yes.
And she,
Yes.
It's so annoying, but I would never be friends with her. But anyway, can you imagine her calling you like all the time, asking you to come on, Paul is doing this? Girl.
F you, Josh Steele. Oh my God. So you're right. You're so right, though. She's over the top.
She
Christy
is. Like,
Cromwell.
it's exhausting. Like, I couldn't imagine. So, but it's kind of like, I like the fact that we're watching this go back and forth between the two, right? And I remember on our last episode we kind of talked about this, how she was following Paul for like days, and we had to see like every single moment. Like, it's like it was a dragged scene. But I do know also that when it comes to like thriller type of suspense type of Lifetime movies, that's something that they like to do. So
Yeah.
I saw this movie more as a Lifetime movie. Sometimes even with Lifetime movies, they're not that great, but you know what? You can't stop watching them.
It's so true, though. Addictive. Yes.
So, I mean, overall, I do enjoy the movie. I would recommend this movie to people, if they want to show it to someone to have like a good laugh. I do think that this is something that you can even start your young kids off watching. Like, I know that's extreme. I mean, there's a couple of scenes to fast forward, but to skip. But overall, I do feel that it is like a typical 80s thriller type of movie. What's gonna happen? Type cat mouse type of game. That they're playing. So, and then when things are started to reveal, I think like even when I say like it has like this format that you kind of see coming, but what kind of threw me off, to be honest with you, the ending, like the last act, basically when Paul and what's her name, Brenda and her brother, they're in the
Yeah.
house. So that kind of, you know, went a different direction.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. Like, if you were to edit a couple different things you said in there, if you were to edit down the movie, like if you took out the very explicit sex scenes or the very R-rated language, this really would be like an after-school special.
Right.
Like the drama, like and from here on out, spoilers, everybody. There will be some spoilers because you can watch this movie and be fine and still love hate it. But like when after Janie dies, Christy is at school and this one girl kind of makes like this offhanded comment, and the acting is so after school special bad. Like she's just kind of like, oh, it's the Grim Reaper's best friend. And like this other guy who's just randomly there, like, yeah, you were the last with Janie, so you're the reason why people die. And it's just so out of place. And Christy, and then all of a sudden Josh Neely comes in like this gallant, bad acting hero who's like, hey, don't talk about her like that. And before this, he really didn't like her at all. So it makes no sense. But this movie also, it goes out of its way. The things that I think are so problematic with this movie are some of the things that I absolutely love about it. Like the movie starts off with this voiceover. The movie goes out of its way to like cover its tracks to make sure that you're not going to walk out of there with any like plot holes. It like will emphasize every single bit of action to so it's like they don't care about being scary or really intense. It's more about at the end of the day, we want to make sure that nobody can pick at this movie the plot holes. And it's kind of like, well, maybe it should have been let a few things go. But right away, it starts off with, hello, my name is Christy Cromwell, and my stepfather's trying to kill me. And it's like, bam, dramatic strings, violin music, and so over the top. But then, even though it, and again, because this movie tries to cover all its potential plot holes, there's a voiceover. Now, I'm ambivalent about voiceovers in movies. I think that there's a lot of like people I think that there's a lot of people that like, or there's like a school of thought, like you shouldn't have voiceovers in movies. A movie should just be able to like contain itself. Other people are like, no, it's fine. I'm ambivalent. I can go either way. But in a movie like this, right off the bat, you're telling the audiences, hey, this is my story and I'm going to live because I'm telling you this story via voicemail. Now, it comes out later on that this voiceover is her writing in her diary, but you still know until the moment that that diary is revealed, every single thing, like the high speed car brakes are out sequence, she's going to survive it. You know that every moment, like with the mom and stuff, they're going to survive everything until you see this diary. But then what kills me is that late in the very final, right as she's like talking to Josh and stuff, the diary thing has already been used. It's already over. She's done writing the diary, but there's still another couple sentences of voiceover. It's her like thinking out loud, but I'm like, it just doesn't work, and it becomes ridiculous. You're like, wait a minute. So you basically told us this whole movie you're going to survive, and in this scene now we're hearing a voiceover that doesn't make sense because you've already established your diary entries are done. And it's like, I don't know, it's so ridiculous because they're so busy trying to cover their tracks. And then yes, one of my favorite all-time sequences from this movie, that is hands down one of the all-time bad sequences from this movie, because it does drag on, is when Christy is following Paul in his car on her bike. And it's literally, it's like they're trying to justify that this could really happen if it happens this way. But when you're watching it as an audience, you're like, okay, what? But she's basically following Paul in her car, and she's like, on day one, I followed Paul to this tree, and then I lost him. And then it cuts. Day two, I followed Paul, and then we got to this place, I followed him here, and at the stop sign, I lost him. So another day, day three, I follow Paul, and we finally catch him. And you're watching it, and you're just like, what? And the irony is that if you're going to use a voiceover in this movie, why not just edit it all down into one sequence where Christy says something like, so after a few days of following Paul on my bike, I finally caught up to him. And it would cut down like 3 or 4 minutes of film time that's used just showing Christy do this. But when you're watching it now in retrospect, I love it because when I show friends this and I watch their reaction, they're kind of like, what? Um, and overall, the dialogue in this movie again is over the top. It's like the again after school special. There's a scene where her friend Janie reveals that she's pregnant, And when they're walking, they've just been chased by Paul Fox. They're walking. Now, Janie has very been free with her sexuality throughout this movie. You've seen more than your share of Janie, let's just say. And they're walking down the street, and she's like, Christy, I'm pregnant. I've been trying to tell you for the last 3 hours. And Christy's like, oh my God, what are you going to do? And Janie's like, get an abortion, of course. And it's just the most ridiculous line. To each their own. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to do. But the fact that that's like the 17-year-old girl's just like, there's no other choice. An abortion, of course. She's like, and then she's like, I just want to party and travel. And then literally you see the car come flying up behind her, bashes into Janie in the most ridiculously cut sequence where Janie's like, to the car, and then it's clearly a dummy flipping around, and then Janie on the ground, and then Christy comes up, and yet again we are embraced by this melodramatic strings music. Janie, I'm surprised Christy didn't just shout out Janie. It's so over the top, but I love it. I love it. It's so bad, it's good.
I agree with you. That is one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
That just brought me, I literally, because I watched it on Sunday night or Monday night, and I literally laughed out loud when I
Yeah.
saw it. And I felt bad because I know it's supposed to be like, oh no, Jeannie. But
Yeah.
something that I found very weird and gross. Josh Dealey.
Josh Dealey. F you, Josh Dealey. How many times does she say that in the movie? I love it, though. Every time she sees him, F you, Josh Dealey. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
But it's weird because, okay, your friend just slept with him.
Yes. Good. Yes, I know where you're going. I love it. Go.
She didn't think that was, now your friend is dead. And now you're sleeping with him.
It wasn't even 24 hours. I was trying to notice this last night when I watched it. It wasn't even 24 hours.
And then she's just loud in her parents' house. Like, she's not going to get caught. Like, she doesn't live with her mom. Like, it was just outrageous. And it's just like, wait a minute. What does this have to do with anything? And then they try to tie from the bed. It was just like over the top. And then once again, where it's just like, what? But you can't help but laugh, at these certain scenes. And then on top
just to give some context though to the audience. So yeah, Janie dies, her boyfriend Josh Dealey shows up at Christy's house, and they start like making out, and it's so teenage awkward, and his dialogue is so stupid in that scene where he's like, are you upset because we were just kissing? Because suddenly you were so close to me. It's so stupid and gag worthy. But then so she chases him outside, he's like doing the sad walk again, the music's playing, she chases after him, she's like, all right, let's go up to my room. And you're like, wait, this girl just now? And then yes, so she's up in the bed, the parents are coming home, and you're right, they're loud, ridiculous, and it's ridiculous, and she's bleeding everywhere, and it's like the music suggests that this is going to be some beautiful love-making scene, but what is happening is she's clearly like, it's okay, it just hurts a lot, and I'm like, oh, that's too much, like that's so awkward. I'm like, I can't. How is this movie happening?
That's the part that like stressed me out, because it's just like, and it went on for a while. So it's like, you're supposed to look at, like, it's just awkward,
They did not edit it down. Everything in this movie is like 1 minute longer than it needs to be. This really was only supposed to be a 42-minute movie, I believe. And they stretched every scene. They're like, oh no, just keep rolling. Just keep rolling. And she's like, this hurts. I'm like, oh God, no.
Stop.
No. But then he comes up there and he's like, then the stepfather catches them and he's like, see, Christy, I can be discreet about people's sexual things. I'm like, oh, what? But and I do want to you said something that I really want to make sure we talk about, is that this movie does predate The Stepfather, where The Stepfather did everything right. Scream for Help does everything wrong. The Stepfather is like this very, streamlined, suspenseful, to the point movie. I really love The Stepfather. It's such a good movie. And this movie is like where that's simple. It's like Halloween was very simple movie. This is like, Scream for Help is like Friday the 13th Part 8, where it's just so convoluted and so over detailed and so over the top. And it's so funny because I'm pretty sure Scream for Help had a much higher budget, which sometimes this goes to show you that like having a lower budget, having less is more. And I guess, Tom Holland, when he was talking about Scream for Help, he said that after the fact, he found out that in Death Wish, Michael Winner there was a lot more dialogue in that movie, a lot more stuff, and his editor had cut it down, and they found out that the more they cut down Michael Winner's work, the better it became. And in this case, it looks like Scream for Help is an example of that, where he clearly left everything in, every bit of dialogue. So, like, it does become so over the top ridiculous.
And something else I was going to say, I know like in the beginning of the film again where Christy, she's narrating and she mentions how she lives in New Rochelle. So I got a little bit excited when I first watched the movie because I'm not from New Rochelle, but I'm from Yonkers, which is in the same county. So Westchester
Cool.
County. Like, oh yeah. So that was just like my little moment of shine. So I was like, I'm going to give this movie a chance. And so it's like, I just watched it through and but what do you like about the movie? I know we've been laughing and saying things that was just ridiculous and stuff, but what's like a scene you feel that's just like, okay,
See, well, for me, it's so difficult because what I like about it is everything else that I would criticize in most other movies. But what, like I said, I do think that the plan in the end, it works. It's again too much. There's too much worrying that like A to B to C gets met in their plan. But like overall, I mean, like they realize like at 2 a.m. again, it starts off ridiculous where they're like, we're not killing the mother and daughter now. We're gonna wait till 2 a.m., leaving all this time for something to go wrong. But then as it continues on, like when she escapes and cuts him and stuff, they're like, well, now we have to wait that extra hour to clean up. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense then. And the idea of like they're trying to escape out the back, which and then when Christy is about to escape to the back cellar and they've just found out they're gonna die. This is the end. And Paul comes down and he slaps her. He like smacks her finger in the floor or the door of the cellar, and he's like, "Yeah, your slut daughter did this." And she's like, literally about to find out she's gonna die, but she's like, "Yeah, well, at least Josh Steele loves me." And I'm like, "This is what you're worried about right now? Like, you're worried about this little argument?" And so stuff like that. So it's hard for me to say what I like because everything is coupled with something ridiculous. But, I mean, if you go in watching Scream for Help with the right frame of mind that like, maybe have a cocktail with it, make a drinking game out of it, you will love this movie. I've shown every time I've shown friends though, I've been emphatic that like, listen, this ain't good. And I don't use the word ain't ever. This ain't good. But it is so bad that it's good. So good that it's amazing. And yet, yes, I wouldn't say it's a suspenseful movie. When I watched it when I was 14, again, I didn't have the sort of like context to understand like how funny it was or this. When I watched it when I was 14, I was like, oh, this is a great 80s horror movie. She's running, chase sequences, the car is out of control. But now when you watch it, it's so absurd. But I do think that the plan works. It's just very convoluted. Once you get past the fact that the plan was set up incorrectly, that they wait till 2 a.m. Everything then in it, though, makes sense within the plan, I think. So yeah, in general, those scenes I like, I don't, nothing. It's so weird to say that. I don't, I like that it's so bad. And that's the best I could say about it because part of the joy of watching 80s horror is that even, especially the ones like Scream for Help that are sincere, if they're sincere, like, I try to think of campy movies I love. Like, I love Mommy Dearest. It's another movie where, like, they tried really hard to make it good, and that's what makes it so bad. And then, in turn, that's what makes it good. And this is definitely one of those movies that represents what I think most people who are, like, not big horror fans, I think this represents what they're all complaining about with 80s horror movies. Like, of course it wasn't as known by the time Scream came out, but I guarantee that if it had been, Scream would have mentioned this movie at some point because it does fit the stereotype of like when Sydney's talking about some big-breasted girl running up the stairs, they're all the same. This is one of those movies that are all the same. Like, it's so predictable. It's so silly, but it's clearly a decent concept because we then got The Stepfather, which was an amazing movie. That movie cut right to the suspense. But what about you? Is there anything that you like would say is like, oh, I really liked that moment in it?
Well, I'm kind of on the same page as you. There are parts that are terrible, but that's what makes me love it. Love certain things. Like, okay, so there's two that like stand out. Well, besides from the one that you mentioned with Jamie, But the part where, so they found out that they're going to die, and they try to do things, and then Christy's like, I know what I have to do.
Oh God, yes, yes.
I have
I
to
have
kill
to
them.
kill them. Yes.
Naturally, I'm gonna go to
Boom, boom. The music comes in. It's so dramatic. Yes, yes. I love that moment. Yes.
that scene. It's just great because it's like, oh, okay, let's see what she's gonna do, and then she kind of like, Home Alone, but more kind of advanced.
Yes.
The thing that made me be like, I was like, wait a minute, that wouldn't happen. So she cut the lights off and she was running, and she literally walked past the brother or Lacey, like she just kind of dodged. It's just like, I can see her crystal clear. I know that you can. She's right.
For
You know
sure.
what I mean? So it's just kind of like, all right, you guys are just trying. Plus, it's just like, how would she do it? There's three of them, and it's just her, And she was making terrible decisions throughout the whole movie. Why now? She knows oh, well, this is what we're gonna do. It's like, whatever. But that's what makes me love it,
Yeah. Well, and expanding upon the moment too, then when they're back down in the basement and she's like grounding the wire or, cutting it. And the mother's like, where did you learn to do this? And she's like, shop class. It was the best elective I ever took. And just keeps going. And you're like, she's like, even though all the other kids made fun of me. And it's such like a cliche thing to say. Again, it's like they're finishing up the after school special where like, oh, this is why a girl can take shop class because now in this moment. And it's like, again, one of those moments that they're so worried that like people are going to watch this and be like, oh, that wouldn't make sense that she could, cut that wire. So they make sure they hammer it in that like, oh, yes, it makes sense. Oh, it's going to make sense. Everything in this movie is going to make sense. And it,
I never even thought. I thought that was weird because it's like, okay, who cares? What does that have to do with anything? But you're absolutely right.
that's what they were worried about the whole time. Like, this movie has to make sense. It has to make sense.
And also, who would make fun of her? I doubt that anybody cared. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, I didn't care that Mary Jo or whoever is taking this class. Who cares?
Right. Right. Although I guess we could argue that those bullies that call her the Grim Reaper, those were the kids all along. Who, by the way, I feel like a scene before she was like friends with them, or like Josh. Again, it's so weird the way things like that because Josh Steele hates her one moment, and then is all of a sudden like this is true love, and then at the end in the climax where like she's at the house with him and you could see a picture still of Josh and Janie right behind Christy, and I'm like, oh, so he hasn't taken that down. I'm like, they're supposed to be in love, but this picture's still awkwardly there. And again, the whole finale too, they clearly went for the Carrie second jump ending thing, and it fell apart again. And it ends on such a note of like, hello, Commissioner. This is Christy Cromwell. Maybe this time you'll believe me. Boom, dramatic music again. And the scene too, I want to make sure I say, although I think we've covered how ridiculous everything is, there was the scene with the commissioner, Josh Dealey's dad, who is like listening to her briefly about Janie's death, and then she's writing in her diary like he's just probably using tactics, saying he doesn't believe me, blah blah blah. And then he comes in and he's like, I just want you to let you know you're the worst kid I've ever dealt with. And you're like, oh my gosh, really? And then she's like, what? Why? Then a moment later, he's like, you must be the best actress around, which is ironic. And then she's just, it's so over the top ridiculous. So then at the end, when, it's kind of like a spite to him, the commissioner, that she's kind of like, maybe now you'll believe me. But it doesn't matter because the whole movie's so convoluted, over the top, dramatic, ridiculous, but I hold it near and dear to my heart. When I found out it was going to be on Blu-ray, I'm like, I have to have it because I've had my VHS copy for such a long time. I remember, the first time I came upon it, we had two video stores in our town. Like Blockbuster was down the road, but we had that video place, which was like a Blockbuster, and Village Video, which was like all these older movies. This video store had been around forever. So their horror collection was out of this world, amazing. So yeah, I was kind of, like you had said, going through each one. I was at a time in my life where I'm like, I need to devour every horror movie. And I came to this one, and I probably came to it subconsciously because Scream had just came out. So I'm like, oh, Scream for Help. Great title. I loved the cover. And then I watched it, but it really is, I remember also being shocked by like the nudity, the language, because like you said before, if you cut this movie down, if you took out the language and the nudity, it really is a like movie for like 12-year-olds. Like a 9, 10-year-old could watch this movie, but then it's so out of place and jarring. These moments of like, oh, there's a breast, oh, there's his penis, oh, they're running through naked, and or she, like I said, my favorite quote of the movie, "F you, Josh Dealey," which I'm doing for YouTube practices, not saying the whole thing, but like I think I could get away with it, but we'll keep it PG, folks. But like, "F you, Josh Dealey," all the time, or "You're a real effer," and it's so, or he called her the C word at some point, and if all that was taken out, they could have very easily gotten a PG rating, I think. And it's still, again, it wouldn't have taken away from the movie at all. That's the only thing that makes it an R-rated movie, in my opinion, is that they added all that in. And it's, again, the plan, everything is so over the top, but I love this movie. I love Scream for Help.
Same. I am right there with you. I
I
just
feel like, we should be ashamed, but I'm not. It's a
I'm not.
genuine comedy that, like, if you go in, like I said, people should go in with the right frame of mind. And if you go in knowing this movie is terrible, you're gonna like it. And honestly, when I watch it now, I would never say it's a scary movie. But if you get attached to a character for whatever reason, good or bad, I'll watch it now and I'll still like have a moment where my like knee shakes, where she's like running up the stairs or they're playing, because I like Christy now. I like her because I don't like her. She is a terrible character. She is spoiled, petulant, the girl who cried wolf, but nobody believes her for the right reasons, because she is a very entitled kid who goes to her friend's house and just opens the door. And like there's even a sequence, like she's that girl, I don't know if she's a wannabe or what, but like there's a sequence where she's like laying on a bed wearing a Muffs t-shirt, and I'm like, that's not this girl. And she's listening to, the soundtrack again was written by I know his name, I think it's like John Paul Jones or something from Led Zeppelin, and she's listening to this song called Silver Train, which really has this sort of 70s rock feel to it. And I'm like, this girl specifically would never be listening to Led Zeppelin. She would never be, but yet you believe that she would, this girl, because she is a wannabe. She is not her own person. She doesn't know who she is, but she stands true to her beliefs and she is like this. But again, it's not believable, which again, full circle makes us love it. Is there anything else though that like about this movie you want to talk about?
I was just gonna recommend it to people. I think that people should give it a watch. Especially, I do feel like this is a perfect October movie.
Yeah.
This is a perfect movie to even try to like introduce people to, I don't want to say horror, but some horror elements.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's just a good time. Like, give it a go. You can't go wrong with 80s movies. If anything, I doubt that there's anyone who actually hates the movie. Hate it. Like, you may
Right.
think that it's silly. You may think that, there's a lot of plot holes, which it's true, but
Yeah.
like just how people really enjoy Trolls 2.
Yes, exactly. No, that's a good example. Stuff like that. Yes, 100% agree.
Because of that, you'll enjoy this movie. And
Yeah.
the thing is, I know that today's date, so it's October 23rd. I was doing some research on the movie. They actually started filming on October 24th.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't it cool?
Very cool. I love it. That's so cool. I believe it because it does have that autumn look, that fall feeling, and that's why I do think it's a good October movie. And I think you're 100% right. Movies like Troll 2 or something that we love, but we also love because they're not, I hate using words like they're bad, but they're not Citizen Kane, they're not Scream or Fright Night, or again, which is ironic because Tom Holland, who is so revered in horror, wrote this movie that's ridiculous, but it's fun. Horror is fun. I feel like maybe because of the title, I keep bringing up Scream, but Scream is just as funny a movie, intentionally so, but just as funny as a movie as a scary movie. And these movies from the 80s particularly, which is why I think it's such a beloved decade, have these movies that are funny for the right reasons and the wrong reasons, and have a few thrills in there. If nothing else, if you've laughed a few times by the front half of this movie, by the second act, you are going to be invested enough to figure out how they're going to get out of this situation. And I think that you will be satisfied. It's not like going out to have a steak, but it's the same thing as having like a cheeseburger where it's not as good as like a fillet, but it is still fill you up and entertain you and be a good treat for horror audiences. All right, and thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What are some of your favorite movies that are so bad they're actually good? And thanks again for joining me tonight, Zena Dixon, the radiant Zena Dixon, who you can find over at Wicked Horror, Dread Central, or RealQueenofHorror.com. And again, I'm your host, Justin Steele. You can also find me at Wicked Horror 411 Pop Culture or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thanks again, Zena. I had a pleasure and a blast talking with you about Scream for Help.
Thank you so much.
And everybody have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.